Cutey Honey universe was made to honor Go Nagai on his 50th anniversary as a manga author, and Production Reed tried to make it closer to the original work than the other iterations. So in this video, I will examine if it lived up to the manga, or if it will just be merely cast off as just another spin-off. First off, I'm going to cover the elephant in the room, which is that, as of
July 31st, 2018,
Cutey Honey universe has a score of
5.6.
on myanimelist.com. The reason the show is so low is because that many people who watch the show were not the correct target audience. The Cutey Honey franchise has many iterations of all different genres. The original 70s anime was meant for kids. Shin Cutey Honey, a late 90s ecchi, was meant for a mature audience. And Re Cutey Honey was an action-packed OVA from the mid-2000s, more geared to young adults. So they all only appeal to a small niche audience and were thus not likely to get widespread attention, thus preventing negative reviews. The alternate world spin-offs are now actually more popular than the original work by Go Nagai. And typically, they only have 3 or 4 characters that were present from the original manga. The manga can't be classified by any modern standards, because it was around long before most of the current established genres, and actually helped to define most of these genres, particularly the magical girl genre. Cutey Honey universe, much like the manga, contains slight elements of each of the spin-offs, but does not necessarily belong in any specific category. Cutey Honey universe decided to keep most of the original cast of characters of the manga, though some were slightly altered and only an insignificant few were omitted. This portrayal was the most accurate of the source material to date, more so than any of the other series. Typically the other series portray her as an adult, so more mature content could be used, whereas this kept her as an innocent schoolgirl taking refuge at a boarding school after her father's death. And she happens to be an android who can use the airborne element fixing device to change into multiple forms, each with unique abilities, and also even into inanimate objects. And by night she fights the evil Panther Claw organization. One of the more significantly altered characters is the main antagonist, Sister Jill. Both versions portray her as the final villain of the series, but in the manga, the leader of Panther Claw is a woman that goes by the name of Zora, and Sister Jill is merely one of her subordinates. Whereas in Cutey Honey universe, Jill is the full leader of Panther Claw. The show does feature Zora as a brief cameo in episode 11. She is a statue above Sister Jill's throne. Another change in the role of Sister Jill was that she simultaneously was the leader of Panther Claw, while also being a police inspector named Janae, who ended up befriending Honey. Making Jill be a double agent thematically works with the trusting and naive nature of Honey, but it is honestly just awkward, because it makes Jill look inept as a leader, Honey just plain idiotic for not recognizing it, and since it is revealed in the very first episode, it does not even create a twist for the audience. Generally, most iterations of Cutey Honey features a perverted duo of Dampei and his grandson Junpei, and like most of the other iterations, they pretty much follow their manga counterparts. Cutey Honey universe kept most of the minor villains from the original manga, though in some cases it did actually expand upon some of their backstories. And even in a few other instances, some of the roles were switched around. For example, in the manga, a character named Dragon Panther attempted to usurp Sister Jill, and she was promptly killed. While in the anime, another Panther betrayed Sister Jill and died in the exact same manner. While in the anime, Dragon Panther lived on to side with Honey in the final battle, thus indeed making her betray Sister Jill again, but only at a later point. My following point would be considered a major spoiler, so I won't reveal who this happened to be. This character dies in both the manga and in the anime, except in the anime it occurs much later, which to me created a more profound impact on the character of Honey. In the manga, this character died immediately following another tragic event, which made the climax of Honey's character occur much quicker. Since the anime made this character live longer, it gave Honey a false sense of hope that she could regain her former life, and it was only to be snatched away, which made this version more dramatic. The setting of the manga took place at an all-girls boarding school, and this anime was no different. The reason why I bring up the setting being potentially different is that the spin-offs took place in a dystopian future where Honey was an adult in the workforce. With the setting finally back at a school, many of the original supporting cast was able to return, such as a BDSM-obsessed faculty and a gang of androgynous schoolgirls. One difference in the setting is that Honey actually interacted with the police, where in the manga, Honey was more of a vigilante and only interacted with the police during or after a Panzer Claw attack. The police in the manga were used as comedic relief and were only present in a few manga panels. Since Honey had more time with the police, the audience got more laughs from the wisecracking preteen detectives and foolish officers with the bodies of young boys. Because the anime setting was the same as the mangas, the majority of the plot could play out in the same manner as the mangas, including many of its most iconic scenes, one of which included an exhausted on-the-run Honey evading capture by changing her appearance to that of a statue to elude her pursuers, only later to be fondled by onlookers who were confused at the sudden appearance of a new statue. The two endings were drastically different from one another. Since Sister Jill wasn't even the leader of Panzer Claw, the manga's ending involved Honey defeating Jill and vowing to stop Panzer Claw and its true leader Zora. I won't spoil the anime's ending, but with the information I provided you, you can probably tell it's going to be radically different than the manga's ending. The final topic of this will be if the animation studio correctly interpreted the themes of the manga, and if they were adapted well. After a major event that occurred in both versions of the story, Honey experienced loss. The manga had Honey retain her innocent personality, but she would not be able to return to her former life. Whereas in the anime, she was able to return to her former life as a schoolgirl, despite the fact that her identity was outed by the enemy and her former school was destroyed because of that. The manga having her abandon her former life showed heroism and somewhat her maturing as a character, whereas the anime doesn't make her progress as a character, and it could potentially put her friends in danger. Cutey Honey has always been known for its nudity. Despite that, I don't consider Cutey Honey to be an ecchi. At its core, I truly believe Cutey Honey is a lighthearted comedy. If Cutey Honey was meant to be an ecchi, it should have been called something like Sexy Honey. And plus, when you think about it, the term cute is more so related to innocence and even comedy. Most of the scenes with nudity in the manga are used for more comedic purposes rather than sexual purposes. For example, when Honey turned into a statue at the fountain, it was more so about having to wait for people to leave, and how the scene kept dragging on, and Honey kept getting more embarrassed. And she'd eventually decided to leave with people watching. The manga also featured nudity with the gang of androgynous girls. If they were meant to be sexualized, they would not have been drawn with chest hair. Now I admit, there is probably a fetish for that, but most normal people probably wouldn't be attracted to that. Plus, the scene ended with them looking into a mirror, and they were scared off by their own appearance. So that doesn't seem pretty sexual in nature. In Japan, nudity often symbolizes purity or innocence. And in many other series like Dragon Ball and Ranma, they also use nudity as comedic relief and to show innocence. Now yes, people do sexualize this series. Shin Cutey Honey confirms this. But I definitely think with the evidence I provided you, I think this shows that the manga was probably more intended to be a comedy. Now, let's see if the new anime retains the comedic nature of the manga. The anime definitely retained many of the comedy-oriented characters of the manga, such as police officers who were portrayed as children, and the bondage-loving sadomasochistic faculty, both of which are metaphors, one for the inept policing in superhero stories, and the other how the school system completely dominates the students' lives. So it definitely kept a satirical look on society that the manga had. The anime even created some original comedic content, one of which scenes started off with a stern-faced Honey wearing makeup, only for it to turn out that it was an older woman whose appearance was altered by a friendly character to look like Honey. So it played tricks on the audience. Some of the manga scenes were lost in translation, though, Many of the cutie funny moments were more sexualized than necessary. In the anime, Honey became the sole object of desire to Sister Jill, where in the manga, Jill was only slightly attracted to Honey because in one instance, Honey was low on energy and had trouble transforming, and Honey kept trying to have to use more ridiculous transformation poses, which slightly aroused Sister Jill and made her blush with rosy cheeks. This again, comedic in nature. The anime also tried to be a lot more dramatic than the manga. The anime was actually much longer than the manga, and with that extra time, more supporting characters were given screen time. So a 3-page betrayal was adapted into an entire episode, and a one-panel death was turned into a tearful last struggle for life. Another instance was a single thought bubble of doubt in Sister Jill became a huge moral decision of disobeying Sister Jill or committing a heinous act. The show also gave more time to Honey and her friends in order to build a relationship. With such events such as shopping, going out for ice cream, and even just more time to bond. So in the end, their eventual separation would be more emotional. In conclusion, I would say Cutey Honey Universe was a very faithful adaptation to the source material. I especially like as the show was not just a shot-for-shot remake of the manga. Nowadays, too many manga to anime adaptations are just lesser versions of the original. This took and expanded upon many of the fight sequences except with better choreography. The vibrant color scheme of this translation really made the manga come to life. I do feel that some parts were over-sexualized, but that's to be expected since they're trying to appeal to a more wider audience. I definitely prefer the conclusion of the manga, since it falls more in line with the earlier espoused beliefs. This show did misinterpret a few intangibles of the manga, but I think that if you like the manga, you should enjoy this version, or vice versa. Yeah, it could have been better, but I would say it's worth a watch, because most of the current season is just medieval fantasy / isekais, and that makes Cutey Honey Universe stand out amongst them. Thank you for watching my video. If you like this, you might be interested in my work next week, which will be if Megalobox can compare to the other great boxing anime, such as Ishida no Joe and Hajime no Ippo. Thanks for watching.